Chapter 18 of The Mystery of Edwin Drood. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Alan Chant. The Mystery of Edwin Drood, the unfinished novel by Charles Dickens. Chapter 18. A Settler in Cloisterham. At about this time a stranger appeared in Cloisterham, a white-haired personage with black eyebrows. Being buttoned up in a tightish blue surtout, with a buff waistcoat and grey trousers, he had something of a military air. But he announced himself at the Crozier, the orthodox hotel where he put up with a portmanteau, as an idle dog who lived upon his means, and he farther announced that he had a mind to take a lodging in the picturesque old city for a month or two, with a view to settling down there altogether. Both announcements were made in the coffee-room of the Crozier, to all whom it might or might not concern, by the stranger as he stood with his back to the empty fireplace, waiting for his fried sole, veal cutlet, and pint of sherry. And the waiter, business being chronically slack at the Crozier, represented all whom it might or might not concern, and absorbed the whole of the information. This gentleman's white hair was unusually large, and his shock of white hair was unusually thick and ample. "I suppose, waiter," he said, shaking his shock of hair, as a Newfoundland dog might shake his before sitting down to dinner, "that a fair lodging for a single buffer might be found in these parts, eh?" The waiter had no doubt of it. "Something old," said the gentleman. "Take my hat down for a moment from that peg, will you? No, I don't want it. Look into it. What do you see written there?" The waiter read, "Datchery." "Now you know my name," said the gentleman. "Dick Datchery. Hang it up again. I was saying something old is what I should prefer. Something odd, and out of the way. Something venerable, architectural, and inconvenient." "We have a good choice of inconvenient lodgings in the town, sir, I think," replied the waiter, with modest confidence in its resources that way. "Indeed, I have no doubt that we could suit you that far, however particular you may be. But an architectural lodging?" That seemed to trouble the waiter's head, and he shook it. "Anything cathedraly, now?" Mr. Datchery suggested. "Mr. Tope," said the waiter, brightening as he rubbed his chin with his hand, "would be the likeliest party to inform in that line." "Who is Mr. Tope?" inquired Dick Datchery. The waiter explained that he was the Verger, and that Mrs. Tope had indeed once upon a time let lodgings herself, or offered to let them, but that as nobody had ever taken them, Mrs. Tope's window bill, long a Cloisterham institution, had disappeared; probably had tumbled down one day, and never been put up again. "I'll call on Mrs. Tope," said Mr. Datchery, "after dinner." So when he had done his dinner, he was duly directed to the spot, and sallied out for it. But the Crozier being an hotel of a most retiring disposition, and the waiter's directions being fatally precise, he soon became bewildered, and went boggling about and about the Cathedral tower, whenever he could catch a glimpse of it, with a general impression on his mind that Mrs. Tope's was somewhere very near it, and that, like the children in the game of hot-boiled beans and very good butter, he was warm in his search when he saw the tower, and cold when he didn't see it. He was getting very cold indeed when he came upon a fragment of burial ground in which an unhappy sheep was grazing. Unhappy, because a hideous small boy was stoning it through the railings, and had already lamed it in one leg, and was much excited by the benevolent sportsmanlike purpose of breaking its other 3 legs and bringing it down.
"Hit him again!"
cried the boy, as the poor creature leaped,
"and made a dint in his wool."
"Let him be," said Mr. Datchery. "Don't you see you've lamed him?"
You lie,
returned the sportsman.
he went and lamed hisself. I see him do it, and I give him a shy as a very warning to him not to go a bruising his master's mutton any more.
Come here.
I won't. I'll come when you can catch me.
Stay there then, and show me which is Mr. Tope's.
How can I stay here and show you which is Topes's, when Topes's is t'other side of the Confederal, and over the crossings, and round ever so many corners? Stupid! Yah-ha!
Show me where it is then, and I'll give you something.
Come on then.
This brisk dialogue concluded, the boy led the way, and by stopped at some distance from an arched passage, pointing.
Looky yonder. You see that winder and door?
That's Tope's?
You lie, it ain't. That's Jasper's.
Indeed, said Mr. Datchery, with a second look of some interest.
Yes, and I ain't a-going no nearer him, I tell you.
Why not?
'Cause I ain't a-going to be lifted off my legs and have me braces bust and be choked, not if I knows it, and not by him. Wait till I set a jolly good flint a-flying at the back of his jolly old head some day. Now look, t'other side the arch, not the side where Jasper's door is, t'other side.
I see.
A little way in o' that side, there's a low door down 2 steps. That's Tops's, with his name on a hoval plate.
Good. See here, said Mr. Datchery, producing a shilling. You owe me half of this.
You lie. I don't owe you nothing. I never seen you.
I tell you, you owe me half of this, because I have no sixpence in my pocket. So the next time you meet me, you shall do something else for me to pay me.
All right. Give us hold.
What is your name, and where do you live?
Deputy. Travellers' Tuppenny, cross the green.
The boy instantly darted off with the shilling, lest Mr. Datchery should repent, but stopped at a safe distance, on the happy chance of his being uneasy in his mind about it, to goad him with a demon dance expressive of its irrevocability. Mr. Datchery, taking off his hat to give that shock of white hair of his another shake, seemed quite resigned, and betook himself whither he had been directed. Mr. Tope's official dwelling, communicating by an upper stair with Mr. Jasper's, hence Mrs. Tope's attendance on that gentleman, was of very modest proportions, and partook of the character of a cool dungeon. Its ancient walls were massive, and its rooms rather seemed to have been dug out of them than to have been designed beforehand with any reference to them. The main door opened at once on a chamber of no describable shape, with a groined roof, which, in its turn, opened on to another chamber of no describable shape, with another groined roof. Their windows small, and in the thickness of the walls. These 2 chambers, close as to their atmosphere and swarthy as to their illumination by natural light, were the apartments which Mrs. Tope had so long offered to an unappreciative city. Mr. Datchery, however, was more appreciative. He found that if he sat with the main door open, he would enjoy the passing society of all comers to and fro by the gateway, and would have light enough. He found that if Mr. and Mrs. Tope, living overhead, used for their own egress and ingress a little side stair that came plump into the precincts by a door opening outward, to the surprise and inconvenience of a limited public of pedestrians in a narrow way, he would be alone, as in a separate residence. He found the rent moderate, and everything as quaintly inconvenient as he could desire. He agreed, therefore, to take the lodging then and there, and money down, possession to be had next evening, on condition that reference was permitted him to Mr. Jasper, as occupying the gatehouse, of which, on the other side of the gateway, the verger's hole in the wall was an appanage or subsidiary part. The poor dear gentleman was very solitary and very sad, Mrs. Tope said, but she had no doubt he would speak for her. Perhaps Mr. Datchery had heard something of what had occurred